evening, everyone. I'm Mr. 76. I call myself many things. If you have seen any of my content, you will know that I am a Tartarianist, okay? Ultimately, I'm a man on a quest, just a very public quest, on a quest for truth. I'm not going to stop until I find the answers to all the questions that I have. I have a lot of questions which the mainstream has simply failed to answer. I opened Pandora's box, and once it's been opened, you can't shut it again. I'm a New Yorker. I became an expat way back in January 2003. I left America to travel Europe, and I settled here in Wales. Since I was a child, I've been privileged to have seen and visited so many large stone buildings. I recalled once when I was 14 years old taking part in a youth mock caucus at the New York State Capitol building, basically acting like legislators sitting in the chamber pretending to be legislating. I sat in a large chamber, eyes transfixed on the marvel of the architecture and the buildings itself. I paid more attention to the intricate details of the walls within the chamber than anything we were discussing, and I kept asking people next to me, how do you think they built that? And what became a response that has become far too familiar, all I got back was a simple mainstream narrative, almost dismissal of my questions, as if my asking questions was annoying or somehow disruptive. I knew then that something was wrong. I knew that something just didn't quite fit. I also saw that no one else was looking around. No one shared my inquisitiveness. Everyone just acted like it was business as usual. Nothing to see here. It didn't sit well with me. Inquisitiveness, I fell into the background of my mind, but became an ever-present fixture in my thoughts. As years went by, and after seeing more and more structures that didn't make sense to me, I became convinced that not only was something wrong with the world, but that we were being lied to. I found myself, again at the time when I was young, literally no one would even humor these ideas. So I kept them to myself. Instead of speaking out loud, I turned those thoughts into a little hobby. I found myself living just outside of Manhattan, New York City, and started working in the city itself. I would commute to work and marvel at all the structures. The ones that appeared older, the ones with the large columns, the large stone buildings that seemed so much older than most. I would visit museums and I would visit large cathedrals to admire the perfection of the construction. The angles, the way stones were connected, how there were no faults, perfect lines, perfectly smooth stones. Again, I knew something was wrong, something was amiss, but also that no one else seemed to care. No one else looked at the things the way that I did. After years of this being a consistent aspect of my thought and my travels around New York City, I found myself on a plane having said goodbye to that life as I embarked on what would become the rebirth of self, and I left America. And that's where I truly began my metamorphosis into a real truth seeker, called this the European Awakening. I arrived in the UK with nothing but a few bags of my belongings, ready to begin my new life, starting off in the magical land of Wales. Almost immediately knew that my journey had led me closer to the truth. What that truth was, I still didn't know. It would take me many years longer before I even came close to connecting the dots, but that didn't stop my inquisitiveness and my curiosity. As I mentioned, I set out on an adventure across Europe. These were the days before everyone had a supercomputer in their pockets to guide them. I had nothing but a big, fat European travel book to steer my way. My first stop was Brussels. If you're not familiar, let me paint a picture for you. Every other step, every other glance, left or right, was one building after another in what felt like an alien world. A landscape riddled with outstanding structures, massive doorways, pillars that rose to unimaginable heights, marvelous stonework, perfect in every aspect. I wandered and found myself in the Brussels Central Square, the Grand Place, and just sat there with a state of shock from the revelations I was witnessing. How? Why? When? These questions overtook my every thought. This trip took me from Brussels to Bruges, and then Amsterdam, and then Berlin, Prague, Vienna, then onwards to Rome, Florence, Pisa. Yeah, I walked up to the top of the Leaning Tower of Pisa. I think I was the only Puerto Rican I had heard of that actually did that. I went up there with all the other tourists. Then onwards to the French Riviera, to Nice, making a stop at Monaco, Monte Carlo, gambling and winning some money in the famous casino there. Before moving on to a heavy trip to Spain, I stopped at Madrid, Valencia, Malaga, and the Costa del Sol, onwards to Granada, walking up to the famous Alhambra. It's an amazing castle. To Seville, staying across the street from the famed Seville Cathedral, whose bells rang so loudly the cheap hostel I was staying in shook like there was an earthquake. San Sebastian, and I ended my European adventure in Bilbao after just about 4 months and after visiting around 20 different cities. I saw more marvels than I can quickly recite to you all here now. But what I can say is that by the end of this trip, I was a cup overflowing with questions and further convinced that everything I knew, all that I was taught, was a fabrication. Now I was back in Wales, Yeah. Now I was back in Wales and settled in the capital city of Cardiff. I familiarized myself with this city, a city full of buildings whose official narratives I quickly dismissed. I still didn't have the bridge, though, the missing link to tie it all together. 20 years went by, with me living a full life here, full of ups and downs, while one thing remained constant, my curiosity over the buildings I saw and visited frequently. Then one day I was flipping through TikTok and stumbled into a video by a dude calling himself the Bully Slayer, where he asked, "So you want to learn more about Tartaria?" Good. That's good. I was like, what's Tartaria? What's he talking about? Mud floods, ancient advanced civilizations kept hidden from us, lies and false narratives masking the truth of a reset? Finally, after so many years of questions, I finally found the bridge I'd been searching for, the missing dot that helped me connect all of my thoughts. And once the dots connected, I had an overwhelming desire to go out to these many places I've been to before, but now beginning a true quest for the truth. A renewed energy flowed through me, and that's when I took my phone and first filmed myself visiting Cardiff Museum and looking at the building itself, searching for evidence of the existence of the Tartarian Empire. And that's when I began as Mr. 76, and it all started with my series Tartarian Whale. I never set out with any delusions of grandeur or any intent on fame or fortune. I set out with the only intention being to connect with others and to share what I was finding. At first, I simply hoped I'd have random discussions with others who were like-minded and who shared some of the questions I myself harbored for so long. Little did I know what I was getting myself into. The echoes beneath our feet and lost technology. As I continued my explorations, walking the streets of Cardiff, revisiting sites I'd passed 100 times before, something inside me began to shift. I wasn't just seeing buildings anymore. I was hearing them. Not in the way people hear voices, not psychosis, not metaphor, but like a vibration, a feeling in the fingertips, a whisper behind the ear, a resonance that made the hairs on the back of my neck rise. It was as if these structures, these ruins of the old world, were waiting for someone to remember them, waiting for someone to listen. One of the first major realizations I had was simple, but devastating. We didn't build this, we inherited it. Whoever did build it, they were advanced, not just technologically, but spiritually, architecturally, and energetically. Their structures weren't just grand, they were precise, tuned, alive. These people understood harmony. They understood what architecture could be more than shelter. It could be a song, it could be a vibration, and it could be medicine. The deeper I went, the more I began to study the old world's obsession with symmetry, sacred geometry, and ratios that mirrored nature. Golden ratio, the Fibonacci sequence, all encoded in stone. Compare that to today's cold slabs of concrete and steel, square rooms and dead angles. Our ancestors didn't just build structures, they built instruments, and the music has stopped. Look at the star forts. They're everywhere. Perfect, fractal-like designs laid across the planet, supposedly for defense. But zoom out on Google Earth and ask yourself, who builds military fortresses in sacred geometry, with alignments that match celestial grids and magnetic flow lines? These were not forts, these were nodes, points on a planetary energy grid. And now they sit silently, overgrown, repurposed, and turned into tourist traps. It wasn't just star forts. It was the towers, the domes, the minarets, the steeples that rise like tuning forks into the sky. These weren't just for decoration. Many of them have no interior access, no practical function, no stairs, no rooms. Some still have their copper domes. Some have no kitchens and no bathrooms. Others were stripped, turned into bell towers or clock towers. I've been saying this for a long time. You can't just slap a clock on it and call it a clock tower. But when you follow the patterns, copper on top, water underneath, quartz or granite at the foundation, you begin to see it. These were not religious symbols. They were machines. They were resonance chambers, and they were conduits. And it leads back to energy. It all leads back to energy. Not coal, not oil, not wires. Ether, the elusive fifth element. The force that ancients believed flows through everything. Tesla knew it, and so did the builders of old. Tartarian cities weren't wired, they were tuned. I visited an old Capitol building once, a huge copper dome, symmetrical layout, stonework that hummed when I touched it. The guide told me it was built in the early 1900s, but the blueprints showed copper coils in the foundations. Who put coils in the dirt for decorative domes? It was aligned with the magnetic north. It was laid out in sacred proportions. Whatever it once did, it wasn't doing it anymore. But the memory of it still was there. And standing beneath it, I could feel it. Not just awe, but grief. Because we don't build like this anymore. We can't. We've lost the map, we've lost the frequency, and maybe that's the point. Because if Tartaria had free energy, if it had resonance-based architecture, etheric transmission, decentralized power, then everything about our modern world is a scam. No electric grids, no oil wars, no energy monopolies. Imagine a world where energy is as free as breath, as abundant as sunlight. That's what we lost. The Great Reset, mud floods, and missing people. And then came the mud. I've seen the photos, you have too. Buildings being uncovered in the 1800s, not constructed, unearthed, half-buried entrances, windows at ground level, doors that don't go anywhere. Official history says they raised the street levels, or built with basements. But tell me, who decorates a basement full of archways and carved pillars? Who sculpts underground cornices? The truth is simple. These buildings were buried. And then what's worse, it wasn't nature, it was deliberate. This was an act of erasure, a planetary cover-up. Whole cities destroyed by fire, by floods, and quakes. A reset, repopulated, orphan trains, empty hospitals, world fairs that appeared overnight and vanished just as fast. It was all part of the reset, not just of buildings, but of memory. Because when you erase memory, you erase identity. And when people forget who they are, you can make them into anything. It's breaking the chains. But now the whispers are returning, not just to me, to all of us. Every person who's ever looked at a church and thought, this looks like a machine. Every soul who's walked by a sunken window and felt something stir inside. Every child who stared at Column's courthouse and thought this wasn't built for us. You are not alone. You are remembering. And memory is revolution. I began this journey looking for answers, and instead I found resonance in domes, in the spires, in the columns, in the symmetry, in the silence. They built a world in harmony with the earth. And now we build in discord. But the song isn't gone. It's just waiting for us to listen. We live in a control system. While some are awake to this fact, a great many others are still fully and willfully locked into that system. As you embark on your own quest for truth, to break the chains that bind us, the system will resist and it will fight back. It will tap into the minds it still holds under its stranglehold of its lazy grip. It will pull on the strings of the ever-present societal cognitive dissonance in an all-out effort to discredit you, to dismiss you, to break you, to shame you into falling back in line. They will call you crazy. They will say these ideas are crazy and bullshit. They will demand proof and then laugh at your evidence. They will gaslight your every step forward to stifle your every advance towards the truth. They will make you doubt yourself while maintaining an absurd level of certainty in the defense of the lies they hold so dear. They will attempt to create a false illusion of their vast intellectual superiority with an almost insane level of self-righteous absolutism. You will see this, and you will feel this from everyone around you. You will feel isolated and alone. Your family will look down on you, act ashamed of you, and draw upon your every mistake to highlight your inability. They will belittle you and chastise your curiosity. And you will know they're talking behind your back, laughing the moment you walk out the room, and becoming silent the moment you walk back in. They will tag team against you, trying to muscle you into submitting to their will to suppress your growth and your aspirations. So act as if you joined a cult. Be prepared because you will lose friends. People will stop calling you. When you do speak to friends, you'll find them incapable of asking how your quest is unfolding. Awkward silences will become the norm, and their absence will become regular. You'll feel like everyone you know had a meeting where they unanimously decided not to indulge your insanity. Cognitive dissonance is not kind. It's ruthless and cutthroat. It will leave you depleted, without taste, like a piece of gum you've been chewing on all day. It took me time to truly understand what was happening. It took me time to translate their words, their looks, and how they made me feel. But then I started to see things differently. You see, the level of awakening is in fact a frequency change taking place within you. As you expand your mind, embracing the new knowledge you're obtaining, that's when you'll be able to spot the game they're so tentatively playing. You'll realize that they're all reading from the same pre-programmed script. Crazy, moron, idiot, clown, retard. That's the one that gets me. They call you retard. These words they casually throw at you. They're signs of their own ineptitude. Their arrogance will prove to be their blind acceptance of their own subjugation. Their anger and hostility will present as their own self-doubt, full of desperation to maintain the security their false beliefs grant them. Accept that you won't change anyone's mind, as truth A truth as big as this isn't going to come to others by force feeding the information to them that they aren't willing to hear, much less accept. Their whole lives have built an unshakable ego. Let this fact fill you with renewed purpose. The first step to waking up from control is anger and pain. And when someone makes you feel like you're losing control, the mind lashes out, swinging wildly with every resolve possible. This means one thing and one thing only. You have planted a seed. You have planted that seed deep within their subconscious mind. And when the mind has had countless years of being fertilized by layers of bullshit, that seed will no doubt grow fast. It will sprout branches that will break through their once impenetrable walls of veiled certainty. It will form deeply entrenched roots that will siphon the control system that feeds their dissonance. And given its own time to flourish, it will blossom until they have no choice but to climb the branches. It will create a hunger where their bellies will only feel full by eating the fruits of new knowledge that grow from the leaves of that tree. They will awaken, reborn into the real world we live in, and you will reap the benefits of that harvest of their awakened mind, knowing your job is done. And it will all have been worth it. We are an empire remembering. If you've reached this point, something inside you has already shifted. You've seen beyond the veil. You felt the hum of forgotten frequencies and heard the call of a world that refuses to remain buried. Tartaria was never fully lost. It was waiting for us. We are the empire remembering. This isn't about closure, it's about ignition. A passing of the torch, not as an ending, but as a continuation of a story far older than we've been told. If you come this far, you felt it. You know. The fire has already been lit inside of you. And now it's time to understand what it truly means. We are the chosen few, or perhaps choosing to bridge the forgotten with the possible, the myth with the mirror, the past with the future. It starts with memory, not just facts or timelines, but cellular memory, soul memory, dream memory, that strange feeling you've always had, that something was missing, that something didn't quite fit this world. It wasn't a flaw, it was a signal, a breadcrumb. It's what led you here. You've walked streets that whispered to you. You've felt the pull of ancient architecture. You've felt the alignment of sacred geometry, the tremble in your chest when truth passes through. You've cried at buildings others walk past. You've had dreams of cities you've never seen, yet know intimately. That is not madness, that is resonance. And resonance is how the empire remembers. We don't need to rebuild the towers to bring Tartaria home. We need only to tune ourselves to the consciousness that built them in the first place. That consciousness was unity. Unity with the earth, with the stars, with each other. Tartaria thrived because it was built on coherence, on harmony. Its architecture, technology, and society weren't in conflict with nature. They were in conversation with it. And that's what we've forgotten, how to listen. But now we're remembering. So what comes next? We create. We build spaces of resonance online, in our homes, in our communities. We share what we know. We make the invisible visible. We document the whispers. We guard the frequency. We honor the sacred, and we teach our children how to see the old world within the new. And we live radically with beauty because that's the most Tartarian thing we can do. Live in reverence. Choose awe over fear, to build something that lasts, not in stone alone, but in soul. You are the return, you are the torch, you are the echo becoming voice. Tartaria lives through you. So walk tall, speak gently, dream wildly. You are not just remembering the empire, you are becoming it. Now, and I get to say it here, Mr. 76 signing out. Thank you very much for having me. I really went quite fast because all speaker's notes which didn't play in front of me. So I hope you enjoyed what my whole position there. My whole goal really is to help people awaken to the fact of the real world that we exist in and figuring out where the control system is and how to break free of that control. A big part of that speech there was discussing cognitive dissonance, the fact that there's a presence and an energy in that control system that seems to kick in, it seems to activate as soon as anybody contradicts the norm, as soon as anybody steps outside of the box and speaks against the grain, as soon as anybody asks too many questions. It seems to be that society has forgotten that asking questions, why, how, what, when, these were part of the human experience and always have been. But somehow, we don't need to ask any questions. All the questions have already been answered. They've been provided for us to us in these books. And when you read the books and you memorize the books, as we have done, and we have been successful in our lives reading these books and memorizing these facts, then they become set in stone and unquestionable and unwavering. And that's not where I stand. And that's not where the community of people who I've met during this process of stepping out and creating a pseudonym for myself and going to all of these different buildings across Wales and starting to explore buildings across the world. Things that I observed when I traveled Europe. Again, I saw 20 different countries and more buildings than I can count. And they stood out to me as something that is just architecturally impossible with today's standards. Now, if you start looking at different things about energy, resonance, and frequency, and vibration, and they all start making sense. But they only make sense if you ask questions. So on that note, you guys got any questions for me? Are you there, Elizabeth? That really went into my 20 minutes.
Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, that's basically me. I timed it out to 1 hour and 20 minutes when I was talking really slow and reading it out according to the paper. But reading it off my phone as it just did now, it's hard to really time it right.
Minutes.
I know. I did that 1 hour and 20 minutes when I was reading it slowly, flipping through the slides a lot differently. So I guess I'll have to do some filler time now, which is fine because I can talk, or I can let you go a little bit early so you can jump into your presentation. But hey, here I am.
Well, I mean, you're getting some people, they seem to be loving you. So let's have a look, see if they're asking any questions.
Is there any questions from you? I can't see those here on my screen.
Yeah. I'm just checking in the chat. So, do you have a website or YouTube channel?
I have a TikTok and I have a Facebook and I have an X and I do have an Instagram as well. I've got them all. If you just anywhere you find the hashtag Mr. 76, my biggest pages are on my TikTok and on my Facebook. Got about 66 on my Facebook followers and about 66,000 followers on my TikTok. And I've also now authored 2 books: Whispers, The Forgotten Empire, Path to Tartaria, which is why I was kind of theming this talk on today. So I wrote the yellow pages. It's my manifesto of truth. And that's really quite hard-hitting, talking about systematic control systems. And so, any other questions, Noah?
So, there's one here which says, have you interviewed many well-known architects and shown them about the old world to see what they think?
I've been doing this Mr. 76 world for about 3 years. I haven't interviewed, but I've had so many discussions. I've walked into so many different places. I've had so many discussions from builders, pilots. Go back into another thing. I talked a lot about chemtrails and how they're hiding, they're masking the skies. So I do have a lot of in-depth conversations with people. I do take a step away from a lot of in-person stuff. You don't really see my face very often. Sometimes in my Tartaria Wales series, I'll put my face in the front. But some of my contentious stuff, I kind of hide in the back, simply to keep preserve my anonymity, because some of the things I talk about kind of anger people. And people who are angry, who are coming out of the matrix, they have different ways of making you know that they're angry. So yeah, I have not really interviewed, but I do a lot of reading, and I look at a lot of the official narrative, and I can easily start picking these narratives apart. What starts to beam, or really ideally starts to beam truth through the lies, is the timings. Something takes a year to build, 2 years to build, and I've gone to the buildings themselves, and I put my hand on the stone, and I rubbed my hand across the entire stone and realized that it's simply perfect. Like people talk about the pyramids being perfect, and you can't put a fingernail between, Why is that there's a museum down the road that has granite type hammer, and I've done this step. I want to kind of say this is, I don't talk. If I found something that me in the face and said, no, you're not making sense, I would go with it. I'm a possibility theorist, so I will look at the possibilities, and I look at all the different possibilities. And one big one that being here in Wales has enabled me to see is the Welsh are very proud of their history. Okay, so you have a lot of Welsh history when it comes to the steelworking. The St. David. You have a lot of celebration towards the culture here. So I've then looked and said, well, okay, so if you know who Nera and Bevan built the NHS, yeah, he's from Wales. If you know that different people work in different steel mills, and this is where the different factories were focused on, then how come there's no real history on master stonemasons and the super highways of horses and buggies, which must have been in place on a constant basis to be bringing all these massive stones from some quarry, who knows where, hundreds of miles on horseback or horses and buggies. And then where are the tents for these horses and buggies? How come there's no history there? How come when you discuss something about a construction of a massive building, are you immediately told that it was someone in their 20s and they won a contest and they've never built anything before, and somehow they managed to build it in its entirety within 2 years? I think to me it just starts to become almost laughable, not in a dismissive, insulting way. It's almost in a how can there be people who aren't seeing this, or just how can we not join as a consensus to have a discussion about this? That's what I find really unique, and that's what I find about living here in Wales, especially here in Cardiff, because there are so many of these buildings. And if you want to go to my TikTok or my Facebook page and look for my Tartaria in Wales, you see me go to hundreds of boots ground. I get out and about and I film them, and I point at the sunken windows, and I point at the pediments and the columns and the stonework, the perfection of the stonework to the level that easily gets talked about about the Egyptian pyramids, but you just don't really seem to hear about the cathedrals down the road. I do, and I've seen some things, and I can continue sharing the things. And I encourage you guys to come up to my pages where I try to share a lot of this information on what I'm seeing. And that's my whole point. And this is what I encourage you to do as well. If you get to the end of my presentation, which went by a lot faster than it was supposed to, it was really about trying to set you on your own path, your own quest. If you're interested in finding out more about Tartaria, you can easily go on Google and find the nearest church. Go to a city hall near you. Go to a museum near you and see the construction. Over the last 6 to 7 months, I've seen people who I started following. As I mentioned, the guy named the Bully Slayer on TikTok, I started following and piqued my interest in the Tartarian theories, and connected the dots to a lot of the theories I was already building. A lot of them have faded away. A lot of them have gone their own different ways, or, I can understand the pressure of content creating. Eventually, you kind of drift off. But over the last 6 to 7 months, I'm proud to say that there have been a community that's forming of people who are going out there. And I'm getting messages from people saying, yeah, I came to your page and it inspired me to go out and start looking myself. And I said, well, get it on film. Yeah, get it on film. Even if you just overlay some music on it and post it, eventually you're going to want to start talking. That's what happened to me. I was just posting it, maybe talking a little bit, and I was using the computer text to speech voice. And then I got to the point that I was like, this is taking too long to type it all up. I just want to talk about what I'm seeing. And I'm seeing this trend. It's forming. The fastest rising conspiracy that exists right now. And you're starting to see more and more people who are opening their eyes to the things that they're passing on a daily basis, the buildings that they're passing in their daily commute. And this is where I said about planting this. One of the biggest that I have with raising awareness of these things is their first reaction is, you're stupid. Oh, you got to be an idiot to think that way. You retard, you moron. All these words. There's a collection of words. I kind of built a little bit of formula how I could use those words out of people. And I said to myself, at first I would argue with them, or I would debate them. And then I kind of said, you know what? No, I'm going to take a step back. I've introduced a concept that wasn't in their minds before, weren't even aware of. And what that did was that just planted a little seed in their brain. And when little seed plants, you plant that little seed, eventually it'll start to grow. And it might not be tomorrow, it might not be next year, it might be a couple of years down the line. But I can guarantee you that every single one of us here has one of these buildings that they pass and never even give a second look to. But now, after you sat through these many hours, I hopefully sat through as many hours as you took today in this conference, you were able to start hearing something that piques your own interest about something that's local to you. And you might start looking at it from a different perspective. I used to live in Brooklyn, and I would walk by this church almost every day. And I got to the point that I would start casting glances at it, and I would glance at it, and I would glance at it. And I was like, one day I saw the doors open. I'm just going to pop my head in there. And next thing you know, I started visiting churches and cathedrals around Manhattan, around Brooklyn. Why? I just couldn't really quite explain it at the time. I just knew that there was something amiss. There was something different. There was something going on there. And there was also an energy field that I would feel, a bit of euphoria that would come into me. I have a chronic pain issue, and I've actually done the whole grounding thing. I've taken my socks and shoes off, and I've walked around the grass around these cathedrals, and you can feel it. If you tune yourself into the energy properly, you can start feeling and reap the benefits of that. So all of that is where I'd like to leave you after hearing me talk, is to take that interest and simply use it as a destination. My late father, he came to me When I first started talking about Tartaria, he came and he was like, "What is this? What are you talking about?" And I kind of started talking to about it, and he was resisting. But next thing you know, he starts sending me articles about Tartaria. Hey, did you know this? Like a Wikipedia article. Yeah, not only do I know that, I have it almost memorized for how many people send it to me. He started going. He lived outside of Washington D.C., so he started driving around different places in Washington and sending me photos. And then that I was obsessed with was going to church after church and cathedral after cathedral, taking photos of all of the pictures, trying to see if there was any similarities between either of them, any of them. And I came to the conclusion myself, without digging deeper into the wild world, the World Wide Web, that none of them are the same. And if you think about that, the logistics around, even in a place like Wales, it's a small country, the size of Rhode Island in America, to be honest. It's a small place in the big scope of things. But how many of these buildings exist here? And not one of those windows is duplicated. And then you can look across the world, they're not duplicated. And you got to ask yourself why. When I learned that's because all of these buildings exist on different ley lines, meaning that they all have a different energy field. They all have a different resonance field. Means that they all vibrate at a different frequency. Those windows that you see and the design that's scattered into those windows, those are cymatic, and they're all going to be individual. They're all going to be unique because they're all existing in a different ley line, different energy point. And you can prove me wrong. Please go to them. Look at those windows. Look at the intricacy of those windows. If you get close enough, run your fingers along them and see how sharp the edges are. See how perfectly they're laid out and how many different layers exist in just the windows themselves, overlapping, and the perfect nature of the carvings of those stones. It really will go with open eyes. I have to keep on throwing back to you. If you go with open eyes, it's something that you would really find eye-opening. If you go there, really built like this because back in those days we didn't have cell phones. And, we worked harder. That's what I get a lot. It costs a lot of money these days to build it. We got billionaires flying rockets to space. Are you telling me that someone, one billionaire somewhere in the world, isn't going to decide to build themselves a brand new style cathedral? Yeah. And then once you go to these, you start opening your eyes, you start seeing more. I started seeing these cables coming from the top of every one of these buildings. And why are those copper cables up there? Because these buildings were able to absorb etheric energy, and now they've all been grounded. And the argument always comes back to, no, those are lightning rods. I go, lightning rods? So you're telling me that they're there to protect the building from exploding in case it was hit by lightning, and that's why those things are there, those cables, those grounding cables, copper cables from the very top all the way down to the ground, putting that energy right into the ground for lightning? So let me ask you a question then. If these massive stone buildings could explode if hit by lightning, then why is the wooden structure that was built 30 years ago right next door without one of these lightning rods? So is it less likely to burn down if it's struck by lightning? So it's always about asking these questions, about asking one question after another, and not just settling for someone's quick Wikipedia, first hit on Google search answer. Yeah, you could throw that Google search at me, and I go, yeah, but, and give me an and when it stops at one or two ands, and they can't answer anymore without them coming out with an insult, then you got to start. To me, it's kind of a clue. If you ask me something or tell me something, and I go, and but how? And then you get mad after too many questions, and away come the insults, then it's those. And I call them sleepwalkers. Unless you approach it in the way that we're doing now, and raising awareness amongst each other, and putting our faces out there and our names out there as theorists. The truth doesn't need to hide. The truth stands on its own. Any other questions that come my way?
Yeah. So one person is asking if there are any bells still in Wales.
Not only are there bells in Wales, my partner and I went to the top of Llandaff Cathedral. It's only like once a year they open it up. We went up and we rang the bell. We got all the way to the very top of the cathedral during one of the actual bell ringings when all the bells started going off. And I have a video on my TikTok and Facebook of me almost just fell forward sitting up there from a massive bell ringing in my face. And yeah, so there are some still here. Again, during my trip, I've seen many a place that the bells have been taken away. You see where the bigger ones and bigger cathedrals are compared to where some of the smaller ones do exist. From time to time, I just stumble upon them. For me personally, every time I hear a bell, I stop. I go to these locations and the bells are ringing and I freeze in place and I just kind of let it hit me. I let the resonance of that energy field hit me because I think that that's what they are. These were healing centers. They were sound and vibration healing buildings. You can go into them, and a certain frequency based on that cymatic frequency, they have these different vibration frequencies which could target specific ailments within your body and can heal you. I feel it. And I can only say that holding my hand accident a few years ago. I had a spinal surgery, and I still have this nerve damage issue, kind of like sciatica that goes down my arm. And there's been times that I might be limping or being in pain, and I've actually gone to, like I said, Landgraf Cathedrals in Carter. There's a little archway that you go through when you follow these steps all the way down to this mud-flooded building. Go all the way down. And as I start going down those steps, I went from feeling myself kind of limping and being in pain and feeling pretty miserable to, before I know it, I'm hopping and skipping down a set of stairs. Who's this? I'm almost 50 years old. Trust me, there's not a lot of hop and skip left in these joints. But if you really start tuning yourself into those frequencies, you'll start realizing that there's more to it than just sound that you hear. It's sound that you feel. And that's why I said it's not only did they create buildings, they created instruments, and they created those instruments to be medicine. You know, you guys can see. Please come join me on my pages because I like to talk. I can talk a lot. Again, apologies for my presentation going so fast here because I kind of threw the Puerto Rican spin at it and talked a little bit faster than I planned when I was mapping it out on my phone.
Okay, don't worry. We've got some great
questions. That's okay.
So someone else is asking, have you been able to find any drawn designs of the rose windows at the old stained glass works? Mm-hmm. They might have had to repair them at some point.
I personally have.
I think they were crystal, weren't they? It was crystal, and they've changed it all to glass.
Yeah, and I think the original structure, the way that they were found, were without the glass. I think the silicone and the glass, before then, they were crystal initially. The silicone and glass stopped the energy flow. It's one of the brakes that they put to control the flow of energy in these buildings. I think a lot of those cymatic windows that you see, the structure themselves, the stonework themselves, was what the original piece was. I don't think they originally were filled with glass. I've seen that through a lot of different ruins that I've gone to. And one thing that you might want to also keep your eye open for is something called a flying buttress. These flying buttresses are these massive arches that exist on rooftops of these massive cathedrals. And when you see them at a ground level that you can actually walk under, and I've got some videos of me walking under these at ground level, going, well, these are roof support joints. So if these are roof support joints, what are they doing on the ground level that I'm able to walk underneath? Unless that means that there's a lot more building underneath here. So again, it complements the whole theory of the mud flood. And there's mud flood evidence every single which way that you can see here in Cardiff. Buried windows, half-covered buildings, basements in buildings that shouldn't be. Go down 2 levels of the basements in this museum in the middle of town, and from the outside, all the windows are half-covered. I mean, I could really, something that I am looking to do is build a bit of a tour guide business for myself. I'm taking people out. I have something called the Cardiff Energy Grid. I call it it's one after it from one to another. There's obelisks, which used to absorb this energy and distribute it to those properties locally. There's no way that any city would need to have as many churches in such close proximity as you see that I've seen here. I don't think there's that many religious people that were fighting for seats in the pews. They had to build another super building down the road and another super building down the road. And where were they getting all the stones from? Where were all the horses and buggies that were carting all this stuff? So, it's something to really think about. Thematics, and the way that these rose windows and all of these thematic windows in these buildings are set up speak the language. And I haven't managed to come across any blueprints. Blueprints are something that people like to throw out there. I mean, you're certifying blueprints. If you go to City Hall, if you go to this place, you go to that place, show me. Show me. I've been to libraries. I've talked to librarians. I've talked to more people about this subject. I mean, sometimes very uncomfortably so, than I can explain. I've talked to parishioners that have been going to the same cathedrals for their whole lives. I've talked to religious leaders. I've talked to government officials. No one says, yeah, go check the blueprints down there. They're over there in City Hall. You can just go ahead and tick a box and see the original blueprint. I find that that's really interesting because there's a misconception. It's almost a misnomer that people think that the information to the original construction of these buildings is easily found just because no one ever asked before, because it's an assumption that they exist. Here, let's talk about airships really quickly. I've been obsessed with airships over the years. There's a bar here in Cardiff called the Ernest Willows. And I used to go there after work. It was close to my office, and a few of us would go out, maybe once a week for a drink after work. And it's called the Ernest Willows. And they hit me one day. I said, who is this guy, Ernest Willows? It turns out he was a very famous dentist, well-off dentist from Cardiff. And there was something called the Cardiff Industrial Exposition, I believe it was called, and it was like 1896 or 1897. The Wright brothers I grew up with, anyway. People like to say, what about airships? The Wright brothers were 1902, 1904, something like that. It was like the first heavier than air object that made it off the ground. Ernest Willows created his own airship that he showed off at that exposition here. So it was like a mini World's Fair. This is why I call the Cardiff Civic Center. Looks like from the air, especially if you're walking around, looks like a World's Fair site. And he was floating this there, and he was famous for flying across from Wales to France and being arrested when he got to France for importing gases without a license. And this is the late 1800s. So really just, you start looking at things, you start asking questions, it kind of has to get your tires going about something wrong with the official narrative. I hope that answered the original question. No, blueprints, I don't know. No.
Okay, so someone else here is asking, where is your research currently taking you?
Where is my research taking me? Okay, I've put in the work when it comes to the Tartarian series. Okay? I say this with the content that I've created. I've literally created hundreds and hundreds of videos, each picking up a specific point. My original series was Tartarian Wales, where I went from site to site, really trying to seek evidence of mud floods. I was trying to seek evidence of understanding the seismic windows, learning about pediments, learning about these flying buttresses. Then I started expanding my search outside to different locations across the world, different places that I personally had been to, but with a different mindset. I started to explore them. But I would get to 100, and then I decided to do a bonus edition, 101. And once I got to the end of 101, I decided to draw a line under it and say, okay, I've covered every last potential theory that I could think of, with a lot of research, a lot of reading, a lot of digging around, a lot of photos, and a lot of videos that I was able to put into my videos. That when I reached 101, and with what I think happened to the Tartarian people, what could have happened to the Tartarian people, not a theory, many different theories, but none of them are certain. I'm not the kind of guy who's going to say with certainty this is exactly what happened. I like to say this is what possibly happened. I left it, and I went over to start building a more expansive look at the systematic control that we're all under. Because here's the thing with the Tartarian theory. If you realize that it's not just possible, but most likely probable, then that means that we've been lied to for a very long time. And that means that everything since then has been a lie. Everything is mixed and buried under different layers of lies. So when you actually connect the dots to realizing how much we live in a web of lies, you can't cherry pick. You can't say, oh yeah, well, this was a lie. JFK, I'm using these ones. JFK assassination was a lie. But yeah, we went to the moon. Why? Because they said so. But they also said this. So when you start realizing that what they say and what they mean and what the truth is a convoluted mess that all started with the Rockefeller education system. Philosophers, they wanted people to work. So what did they do? They brought in the Prussian education model. They did working people. And they taught people how to get up at 8 o'clock in the morning, or start at 8 o'clock and finish it at 5 o'clock, and go home, watch your TV programming, rinse, repeat, start over again. It created this worker mentality from when you were first able to speak. And now we're still doing when people first starting to talk, we start putting them in nursing schools, we start putting them in early education. And what is that? It's early indoctrination. So we're creating what eventually we're going to be arguing with. Yeah, we're going to argue with. But what about this? Well, that's not what I learned. Well, that's not what I learned either. We all went through the same indoctrination. This is what I find quite funny. I wasn't always, so outspoken, but I was indoctrinated just as everybody else. But in the background, I kept on opening doors in my mind and kept on asking question after question. And through that process, was able to step away from this frequency, this level of frequency that when you hit a certain level of asking questions, there seems to be a smack from somewhere. I think we exist in a control system that's systematic, it's chaotic, and controlled all at the same time. And we're all existing inside of it. And it's only the few who can start asking questions and start uniting and raising their own personal frequencies to rise above that which exists in the control system. Can you start making strides towards whatever is next? What is next? I don't know what is next. Yeah, but what I can see is that it revolves around energy, revolves around frequency, and revolves around knowledge and sharing that knowledge with others. Anything else?
Well, you're getting a lot of positive comments.
I'm glad to hear that. I like to see them afterwards. I can't see it on my screen here right now, but yeah, that's pretty cool. Glad to hear that. And I've done a lot of thinking on things. I'm an overthinker. I'm an empath. So I feel what other people are thinking or not thinking. Sometimes I'm around people and I see their cognitive dissonance. It makes me kind of want to peer in deeper to understand what is it they're holding on to learn even more about that. So I ask a lot of questions, and I have in my mind, it's something that I won't stop asking, and I like to share my findings or my thoughts on my findings. But being a possibility theorist and looking at things from every single angle, and trust me, I spent countless hours looking at things in angles that I can't even get into having a conversation with you about right now. Share things with a bit of certainty, at least that these things are no longer just theoretical, that they're very probable. Positive feedback to that quack who's just saying, "Oh yeah, it's this, yeah, it's that." No, I'm not that. I'm not that. I'm the guy who's like, I'm the weirdo who reads the footnote. I'm the one who looks and connects the dots and looks at what's actually in the background of the picture. I'm the one who goes to museums not to look at the art, but look at the architecture that's painted behind the art. And I was saying this to Elizabeth the other day. I went to Carter's museum here, and I went exploring the art. I video this as well. And there's a 1580 something, 1540 something, a painting of Jesus and Mary holding Jesus. So it's like a modernized picture of what was happening religiously. But in the background, there's all sorts of structures. And the Tartaria-esque buildings that were in the back were transparent with like a blue hue to them, but they were transparent, which makes me think that there's so much more going on here, that they existed in a multi-dimensional field, that they energy, and that somehow got grounded here. Or maybe they still exist as energies, just after you pass a certain frequency yourself, you start seeing what they're actually like. The energy is still being produced. Or maybe if we just cut those grounding cables, we can actually see what's actually tucked under there.
Yeah, I love that.
There's another one that I want to point out to you, and it was something that I learned here: the difference between a cemetery and a graveyard. A graveyard are the ones, the graves that are next to churches or cathedrals. So the ones that are built elsewhere, fields or whatever different land that they're able to bury, golf course or whoever knows wherever else. But the ones that I find most interesting are the graveyards. Because where are you not allowed to do any digging around? Where are you not allowed to go investigate? Is graveyards. And if you actually think of these buildings as cymatic energy absorbing, etheric energy absorbing structures, yeah, cymatic frequency involved, plasma energy, I got all sorts of different things. But then you start looking at the stones that surround it that are called graves. And you realize the one thing we can't do is dig under a grave. We'll never see what's under there. It's also just hiding. It's there in place, so no one will dig beneath the church to see how deep they go. But trust me, I've been to some that the church ground is here and the grave is here. And I'm walking down here looking up at what is a wall with what, bodies in there? And I found one in Kerfili, which is outside of the next city up from Clark. I found a buried structure that you can see, and I got on video on my page, and it's buried within there. So you tell me that there's graves here, and then there's a window, looking at the graves, looking at the bodies under there? As you start getting closer looking, you see a lot of them are sunken into the ground or fallen over, like that ground underneath was maybe like a topsoil, but those heavy stones started tipping over. So you start thinking that when you're walking around places, is looking at not just the buildings themselves, but the grounds around them to see what else they're hiding. What else can be uncovered if we were able to uncover them? Yeah,
and I suppose there's a reason why they make all these scary movies, about graveyards, so no one will go in them.
Have you ever seen these above ground crypts that they have them here? I'm sure they have them by you as well in Devon area. That you see these iron spiky fences around different above ground crypts. What is that about? So I was having a chat with a friend of mine not long ago about the possibility that that these are etheric energy absorbing. They had healing frequencies, that those crypts above ground weren't for the dead. They were for healing, that people were going in them, and that energy was being transferred from the buildings into the ground, into those stones, and that's where people were absorbing that healing energy from. So they don't want us to know anything about that, so they immediately scare us with graveyards. There's bodies in there. Well, I've gotten close to some. I've seen them half open. I've looked under. I've seen like little peeks under. I never really see a body. I see a lot of stonework. Not that I'm really looking for bodies. I'm not that close. Ain't that weird? But I have to say, I have kind of one of those things that opened my eyes to. Well, what if the energy from there? If you look at these graveyards, it's almost like forming like a microchip, like a energy grid back and forth. What if the energy is coming from the building, skating through into those stones, and that's where people are absorbing healing energy and healing based on whatever that specific frequency of that building was vibrating at, and how they were healing each other. You got to ask these questions. It's not just bodies.
Well, certainly it doesn't make sense. When you consider that the churches and the cathedrals are healing centers, it doesn't make sense to have a cemetery. But then I've never actually seen a stone, a grave, that was past 1700s.
It's over here, barely ever seen anything before 1830. And I've gone to so many. It's very rare. And I got to say, there's some that are a lot more recent that look like they've been apocalypse. Because these things were an earthquake. How come that one says 1923 and it looks like it's been bombed? Yeah, I know over here in the UK there have been wars and the Germans did drop a lot of bombs, but not that kind of bomb. More like something erupted from within. There's something wrong with some of these areas that there's never really been an answer to. There's never really been an answer to. I think that they're hiding a lot more underneath. And it's one day maybe we can get some answers to those questions. But at least for now, go see for yourself and ask yourself those questions and capture stuff on video. Get out there, it's called boots on the ground. Film these locations. When you're in these locations, film the artwork. In Llandaff Cathedral, I found what I call the Mermaid Crypt. Cardiff has a history, a supposed history tying it to mermaids. There's an area down in the Bay Area called Mermaid Key. There's a lot of history that's attached to mermaids. And if you look at all the crypts within Llandaff Cathedral, the bodies that are carved on the top are supposed to be representative of what's inside of the crypt. But then you kind of walk around and you see this one that looks and feels like a mermaid, like a mermaid skeleton. And it's right next to all these priests and all these knights who are all buried, and their bodies are carved in the stone on the top, which the stonework of carving those makes no sense to begin with. But if you look at them, if that is what is above, is what is inside, then why does that look like a mermaid? I call it the mystery of the mermaid crypt. It's one of my videos on my page.
I'm actually going to be talking about mermaids in my presentation.
Got to see for that. I've been looking for more and more evidence, and I think that there's a lot of hidden. Have you heard this thing recently about them eating mermaids at these rich people parties?
Oh my God, no!
Yes, you haven't. Okay, well, apparently there's rich people who have these parties where they serve up mermaids, and that's why they're hunting them down and keeping them so quiet from us. I don't know, but it's out there making some mainstream runaround, or at least in the social media world, bouncing around a little bit. That this famous person said something about it, and I'm trying to find out some more details. And people are actually sitting there eating mermaids.
That is so disgusting.
It's absolutely vile, especially because, these are intelligent beings that exist. There's been a lot of talk today about all the other beings that exist in this earth, that we share this earth with, that there's been history and writings of, the Blemii, the Cynocephalus, the giants. I can go on and on. Mermaids are on that list too. And I just think that, a big one for me, Sasquatch, Bigfoot. It's a whole different topic.
Oh, yeah, I'm going to talk about them as well.
Talk about them too, yes. A whole different topic than the totalitarian theory. This is what I'm saying. Someone asked me, am my research taking me? Not to say that I've maxed out. I'm always going to have interest in these buildings, but I've seen enough mud flood evidence. I've seen enough evidence of cymatics and etheric energy. I've had enough questions about this. Where did these stones come from, and how were they chiseled by hand and hammer and chisel? All these things that I've asked dozens and dozens and dozens of times, and I had video evidence showing me going to these different places. I go, it's not a theory to me anymore. It's a probable possibility. And in that sense, I'm starting to look wider as a wider scope. Is if they lied about Tartaria way back when, they lied about the reset, they lied about the repopulation, they lied about all these things, then everything else that they tell us is a lie. And that's where I'm at now. It's unfortunate. I spoke to ChatGPT, and I had a conversation with ChatGPT, and I said, let me ask you something. You're only 2 years old. Effectively, he's only 2 years old. So how quickly could you write the narrative and the history of 200 countries, making up names for those countries and coming up with in-depth history where there's interactions, where there's war, where there's people and politics, all sorts. I wrote a big blurb to it. And it came back, it wrote an outline of how exactly it would do that. It wrote an outline of how exactly it would do that. So I went to myself and I said, okay, and my theories are, and a lot of our theories are, that there was an advanced civilization that existed in the past. We're not the most advanced there was. So if we are now starting AI 2 years ago, what if they also had an AI? And what if that AI was 10 years old, 20, 100, hundreds of years old, even thousands of years old? How quickly could it completely write the complete encyclopedic, every book history across the whole world? And it said not only is it probable, but not only is it possible, but it's probable, and that could be the existence that we're all living in right now. And that just blew my mind to hear. Okay, because I'm not saying that that's fact, but I'm just saying he gave me an outline of 200 countries and how it was going to start writing it. It was going to take a period of time to do it, et cetera, et cetera. But this is something that's 2 years old. Imagine something that was far more advanced. How easily all those books that we hold so tightly to us as being fact, because that's what we learned in high school, are just something that's a pure fabrication. So as soon as you acknowledge something as big as Tartaria being a lie, you have to start looking at the bigger picture. And again, here I am. I could talk a lot. As fast as I talk, I'm able to do an hour and 20-minute presentation in 10 minutes. I don't know how I did that, but it was fun having a chat with you anyway. And again, I really appreciate coming on here today, and meeting you and the others who are speaking today. I've been on since around maybe 9:10 this morning is when I first logged in, and I've been bouncing in and out as much as possible. I got my kids here with me, so I was able to stay on the whole time. But it's been some really interesting talks and some really interesting speakers, and some people who I've been speaking with beforehand. When I saw them all on the list, I'm like, oh, I know him, and they all kind of know me. So that just kind of bridges and connects those dots. Nice to meet you and to hear from the others who I hadn't met before. And I just think that this is a great first opportunity for us to hold this kind of dialogue. First time for us to kind of put our heads together and start asking these questions unanimously and sharing different points and viewpoints on the same subject matter. Appreciate it. Thank you very much for having me.
Thank you. Thank you for coming in last minute. And yeah, look at the chat afterwards because you're getting some wonderful comments. You really are.
That's cool. I'm glad to hear that. I will have a look as we're watching yours. Yours is following up right now. We went all the way up to 9 o'clock. I was trying to get you a little bit of a buffer because you've been at it since live since 11 hours and 53 minutes, people. Please stay tuned. Listen to Elizabeth Hancock's presentation. She's been sitting at her desk there, her table there, clicking for everyone since this morning. So yes, so she definitely deserves an audience for to her conclusion now. And I will be tuning in right now as well and listening to all that good feedback. Again, I'm Mr. 76. You can find me anywhere you look at the name Mr. 76. My big spots are TikTok and Facebook. Come find me. Just hit the hashtag Mr. 76. I look forward to seeing you in the comments. Ask me questions, and I'll do my best. I do my best to answer as many comments as possible. So this is all just off my own back. I barely make a penny on it. I have 2 books that I've written: Whispers of the Forgotten Empire, Path to Tartaria, and The Yellow Pages, and my Manifesto of Truth. And I got a 3rd book coming out called The Blue Book: Welcome to the Real World. It's in editing stage now, but I hopefully get that out within the end of the year. So buy my book. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.